Thank you for tuning in today. I'm sitting with Glenn Poulos, the co-founder, vice president, and general manager of Gap Wireless Inc. With over 3 decades of experience in sales, he has developed a successful strategy system by spending thousands of hours in the field or on the phone with customers and working with salespeople in several successful companies. Thank you, Glenn. I'm super excited you're here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, Marcy. Thank you.
I want to dive in all things sales. So, in all
Sure.
of my history of employment and entrepreneurship, that is one area I suck in. So, lay it on me. Give me all the
Well, we're
juice.
all salespeople really at heart, right? We're always, fundamentally, it all boils down to sales. Or as I like to say, nothing really happens in any company until something gets sold, right? To me, it's the most important part of it.
So, sales to me feels dirty sometimes
Yeah.
and slimy. How do I reframe that?
Funny you say that. So, shameless plug for my book. I'll start right off with a shameless plug, right? My book, it's called Never Sit in the Lobby and 57 Tips on How to Build a Career in Sales, how to build a business in sales, right? And so it's loaded with tips and things, but really the whole idea and essence behind the book is how to get, act, and stay in front of your best customers and be a pleasure to do business with always, right? And so, when you're saying what you just said a minute ago about, slimy or negative or whatever, it's like, don't be that. That's one of the key things is don't, if you're going to be a pleasure to do business, don't not be a pleasure to do business with, right? That's the most important thing, right? And don't be a pain in the ass. And as I like to say. And so I follow all sorts of rules along the way to try to endear myself to my customers so that they want to invite me back and that I really truly am a pleasure to do business with. And that's, how I made it through 40 years of sales. I've built 2 companies successfully and sold them. Gap Wireless, I sold that business recently, and I've bought a new business in Florida. I've changed countries. I've changed technologies and customers and just about everything now. And I'm doing it for a third time. And it's all based on these are sales businesses that I've been involved with over the years since 1985. Yeah, and I can happy to go through lots of reasons why we're not slimy and we're we're a pleasure to do business with.
So for most of my career, I worked at my dad's office, and he was the first non-union contractor in Northern Nevada. And so during that time in the 70s, A, we did a lot of work with unions, and B, he's built such great relationships on handshakes. And it doesn't seem in
Right.
the modern environment that that's really present anymore. And I feel like that's a travesty.
Yeah.
Curious how you address that in your framework.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I'm getting old myself. I often will reflect back on the old days and what it used to be like. But truly, the most successful, I think, things are done person to person. Whether there's a handshake or fundamentally, it often does boil down to a handshake, and there's usually paperwork at the end. But you're agreeing on a set of terms and conditions that are agreed to. And in my case, a lot of times face to face, and then you send sort of paperwork to officiate the deal, right? But I find a lot of people nowadays, they try to skip over the part about face to face. They want to do it remotely. They want to do it virtually, right? From the comfort. They want everything to be remote and dial it in from some beach in Costa Rica. And but most things of real significant value that get sold person to person, and and there's still people involved, right? And that's really the essence of sales, driving business to your company, to your website, generating leads. That's marketing, right? And so I often try to explain to people the difference between sales and marketing, and and try to understand the difference and figure out which department you want to work in, right? Because they're quite different. They're quite different roles.
So how would you explain those roles to our audience?
Yeah, so when you're in front of the customer and you're demonstrating the product, showing them the features and benefits and demonstrating how it's going to make their life better, how it's going to make them feel, that's selling, right? Everything else that leads you up to getting to that point is marketing. It's that simple. So all the lead generation, all the LinkedIn stuff you're doing, any of this AI automated, appointment setting, that's all marketing. That's not selling. The selling is the part where you're literally working face to face, maybe not directly face to face, because obviously geography, time, distance, and whatever. But fundamentally, when you're interacting with the customer, that's the sales piece, and where the customer's learning how your product or service is going to change their situation. But everything that leads up to that is marketing. A lot of salespeople like to sit and, oh, I like to work from the office doing this and that. And really, the true sales guys never want to be in the office. They're always out in front of customers. They're always doing deals, and they're always making more money than the next guy, and for the most part.
So, how did you become a sales coach? What inspired you to all of a sudden?
So essentially, I got kicked out of the government, and so I was an electronic technician for the Canadian Weather Service, and fixing little gizmos and gadgets that helped predict the weather and measure things, measure cloud heights and temperatures and humidities. And my boss came to me and said, "Dude, you're in the wrong field. You should be in sales." And this was in 1985, and I took him at his word, and I decided that I would take a shot. So flipped open the paper back then. If you wanted a job, you looked in the newspaper and saw a job for a technical sales rep, and I applied for it, and I ended up getting the job, and I ended up so I left the cushy confines of a federal public servant role and joined the world of commission sales. It wasn't 100% commission sales, but obviously we were making commission, and that was in 1985, and I started learning the ins and outs and all the rules that I started writing down and what have you. And ultimately I ended up learning that the owners of the company were actually doing even better than I was, right? So I was doing really well and I thought I was excelling, but then I realized, hey, wait a minute, like I only get paid when I sell. If I own the company, I get paid when everyone sells, right? And so, but you have to be willing to start a company, hire people, etc. And so, there's a bit of risk involved. But so in 85 I went into sales. In 91 I quit my job and I started my first company, and ran that company for 15 years. I sold the business, and then I was fortunate enough to be able to start another company, which I ran for 15 more years, which was Gap Wireless, which you mentioned at the beginning.
Mhm.
And I sold that to private equity in 2022. And I just finished a 3-year stint working for them, handing over the business and helping to merge it into their bigger company. And I finished that on New Year's Eve. And on January 6th, I moved to Florida and bought a new business. And I'm starting over again in a company that's been around quite a while, but a much smaller company than the one I sold, and doing it all over again. But I'm sorry, but I kind of forgot the question. So I'm not sure if I gave you the answer.
You actually nailed two questions without even knowing the second question because I wanted to talk a
Okay.
little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, and you already hit it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I figured out that I'm incapable of figuring out how to create a resume. And so I just basically start new companies. And that way I don't have to ask for a job, right? And I can't be fired. But it's not always smooth sailing. And the throughout the years from 85 to 2025, which is 40 years, I used to say 30 years and 3 decades, and now it's 4 decades. But there's been lots of challenging times. There's been lots of setbacks along the way, and this particular economy that we're in right now is proving to be significantly challenging for all of us. And I don't even know what's going on, to be honest. And it's just a very strange time. And now with all the tariffs and all sorts of international trade issues, and the businesses that I run, the whole idea behind them is they're international trade businesses. So essentially I would import products from Europe and Asia, North and South America, all over the world, and sell them in my local market. And that's the benefit to these companies. Like, for instance, we represent a company from Sweden, and they don't have a sales force in the U.S. So my company is their U.S. sales force, and
Wow.
we're their distributor. And so we also represent a company from Italy and Australia and South Africa. And of course, now it's a little, in the last few days or whatever, it's been a little simplified, but the challenges with the tariffs and everything are really putting me to the test. Of I thought I would just slide in and just another company, do it again, three times the charm. And I'm really being tested to my absolute max on what it takes to run a business and be successful. So
I kind
um
of chuckled for a second because you said that being an entrepreneur involves a bit of risk. And I laughed
Yeah,
at the bit of risk because
a
you're
bit of
talking
risk. Yeah,
about that
yeah,
risk right now. And
yeah.
what advice would you have for our listeners that are new to starting a business and are struggling with the grit that is involved in being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So there's sort of two sort of parts to that. One is like the person that wants to be an entrepreneur and is kind of stuck in their 9 to 5, and how do I get out of it and how do I get started? Like for instance, they may have the right idea, they know what they want to do, but they have this fear holding them back from taking that final step. And then there's the person that is new to the game. Maybe they started their business sometime recently and what have you. So and they're two sort of distinctly different situations, right? So dealing with the person that's still working first, right? I have a little analogy called the wall that I talk about. First thing, when you're going to start, if you're going to start a business, a lot of people are like, oh, I just found the best mousetrap and it's going to revolutionize the world. And I'm like, oh, really? Another new mousetrap? That's amazing, right? And then I'm like, well, have you showed it to any customers? Has anyone ever told you that they would buy this mouse? Oh, this is amazing mousetrap. It's going to sell like hotcakes. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you take a day off work and go and visit a few customers and see what they say, right? And only to find out maybe that we're no longer trapping, we're no longer, killing mice or whatever. We're now like gently rehoming them, right? So if you have a rehoming solution for mice, then we're happy to hear about it. But we don't want a mouse trap that, injures mice or something, right? Right? Like people
Right.
don't, they think they've got this. So one thing before you start your business, you need to know that you've got customers for the thing that it is that you want to sell. It is very difficult to start with no customers, and often people times they'll come up with a technology or something like that, and they'll spend all their money getting patents and other things. Oh, I want to protect my product and whatever, and they haven't sold a single product, right? And so, not to say you're not wanting to protect your intellectual property, but it's always important that you've got your customers identified, right? The products will take care of themselves if you have customers willing to spend money, right? But so if you've got that part identified, you know what you're going to sell and you really know who you can sell it to. And maybe you've sold a few, on the side. The next thing is that whatever you think it's going to take 3 or 4 times as long to do it, and it's going to cost 5 times as much, right? And so you either need a spouse that is gainfully employed and capable of supporting the household for whatever length of time it's required. And I typically tell people 18 months, or you need 18 months of food, money, and rent in the bank. You need one or the other. So you either need somebody on your team that's going to help support you during that time so you don't have to worry about pulling any money out of the business, or you literally need, if you're the sole breadwinner in your situation, you need 18 months of personal runway so that you don't need to burden your business, because it will take that length of time before you can start realistically pulling the wage you were making at your old job. And if you have that, then you kind of come up against this wall where it's like this fear, like, I don't want to give up my job and I've got benefits. And what if I'm not successful? Every day that you don't leave and don't quit your job, you keep hitting the wall, right? And the thing is you can never get past that wall until you sort of just basically take a leap of faith and climb up and over the wall and quit. And it's really just one step, right? One step you're behind the wall and you're banging into it. The next day, you're on the other side of the wall and you're no longer looking at the wall. The wall becomes something that's behind you. And now you're an entrepreneur. And so the only difference is that you were scared of prior to quitting your job and you were hitting the wall. But on the other side of the wall, you're mortally terrified, actually. And the fear is like significantly greater, but it's the fear of starving, the fear of failing. But what happens is every day that you take a step and every day that you do the next right thing, the wall becomes one day behind you. And in 6 months, the wall becomes something that you can't see it anymore, right? It's in the distance. But on the other side, before you quit your job, it's there every minute. It's there holding you back, right? And so it's really a matter of being prepared, finding the product or service you're going to sell, putting the money in the bank so that you can support yourself, and identifying who you're going to sell it to, and then take that leap of faith and don't look back. Right. And you have to just move forward. And so now fear will be a part on either side of the wall, but one is holding you back. The other one is pushing you forward. and
I love that.
it becomes your friend, right?
So, what other strategies do you have or principles from your book to help individuals improve their skill set with sales, and specifically around the fear?
The whole idea of, again, behind the book, I have a little saying, how to get, act, and stay in front of your customers and to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? That's really what the book. And so in the book, there are just page after page of tips on what to do or what not to do. And so I just tell people, flip it open to any page and just read a rule and just either do that or don't do that, whichever, because some of the rules are do it, some of the rules are don't do that, right? Because it depends on the rule. And so, for instance, one of the rules, the title of the book is never sit in the lobby. When I visit a customer, when I show up in the lobby, I never sit down. I announce myself to the either via the phone that's there, or in the old days there used to be receptionists, not so much anymore. But if there is, I announce myself, and then I basically stand, and I don't allow any distractions to. And I don't show up too early, so I don't want to be standing there for 10 minutes, twiddling my thumbs, right? And so and then that way, because what I ended up happening was I realized that I was getting distracted in the lobby and I would start flipping through things. And the customer would come in, and sometimes I wouldn't even realize they'd walked in, and they would sort of catch me by surprise. And the other thing is, like, oftentimes, if you're sitting in the lobby, the customer is standing in the lobby. So they're naturally above you and they're looking down upon you, distracting you, startling you. And none of that is a good look.
Yeah.
That's not a pleasure to do business with. So I'm waiting. I don't want to say I'm at attention, but I'm attentive, waiting for you to walk in. My next actual rule is when the person walks in, I always have something in my hand and something in my mind. And so I'm never struggling for what the next right thing to do is with a customer, because I have something to hand to them. It might be like a giveaway, like a pen or a mouse pad or a water bottle or golf balls or, whatever we're giving away that week. Or it might be a piece of literature, a quotation, because oftentimes customers will say, hey, can you send me information on X, Y, or Z product? And most people will say, sure, let me email that to you now. Or let me send you a link and you can download it from our Dropbox or whatever. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Like you're in such and such of a town. I'm going to be on calls in that town next Thursday. Can I drop it off? And they're often like, oh, no, no, I'm too busy. I'm too busy. Just send it. And I'm like, well, it's okay. It's no problem. I'll just drop it in the lobby. And they're like, okay, drop it in the lobby, but I'm really busy. And so now I know that I'm going to be in that town that day, right? Say
Mhm.
Thursday. And so what I'll do is I'll go to my CRM and I'll look within 10, 20 minutes of that customer, and I'll figure out every other customer that I've ever dealt with that's in within 10, 20 minutes of that customer. And now I'll start working on those people to see if I can have reasons to go and see those people as well, right? And that's how I end up filling up my day. And so when I show up to the lobby, remember the guy said, or the gal said, I'm too busy to see you, right? Well, this is a week later. They forgot that they told me they were too busy. So that when I show up in the lobby and I announce myself, 99 times out of 100, they'll come down and see me, right? I have something in my hand, the information they asked for, and I have something in my mind that I want to talk to them about. And I'm like, here's the brochure, here's the price, or here's a giveaway. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And then I just continue on with my series of rules. For instance, the next rule in that particular litany of rules is always ask for a mini tour, right? And everyone's like, what's a mini tour? And I'm like, oh, well, a mini tour is a tour that's mini, meaning it doesn't take 4 hours. Can you just show me around where it is you want to use whatever it is you asked me about? Right? Maybe I sell things in the factory, right? Maybe it's in the production line, maybe it's in the assembly line, maybe it's in the quality assurance area, maybe it's in the warehouse, maybe it's in the logistics, space. It depends on what you're selling, but can I just see where you're going to be using the product so I can get a better handle and more and and usually they will actually give you the tour. Most times, again, 9 times out of 10, if you ask them, they will do it, right? And remember, I wasn't sitting in the lobby, right? But I showed up 15 minutes early. And so instead of sitting in the lobby, I sat in my car. And when I was in my car, what I do is I pull out my phone or my laptop, whatever it is, and I go through my CRM and I think, who else have I ever talked to at this company? And because I'm dealing with big companies, Fortune 500s, Fortune 1000 companies, I visit them more than once. So I meet Sally and Bob and Joe and Sarah and whatever. And what I do is I remember their face. right? And so I sit in my car for those 15 minutes and I go to LinkedIn. And I remember, Bob's the bald guy, Jack's the tall guy, Sarah's got red hair, whatever it is I need to bring the memory of their face from way back in my long-term memory to the front of my memory so that it's instantaneous. Because remember, now I'm on a mini tour
Yeah.
and I'm walking through the hall, and guess who's going to walk by? Bob, Sally, George, Sarah, and I'm going to be saying, "Hey, Sarah, George, what? How's it going?" And everyone's like, "Who's that?" Oh, right, that's Glenn. He's such a pleasure to do business with. He always remembers my name.
That's so big.
The person you're with is like, "Oh my God, this guy knows everybody," and so it's immediate social proof, right?
Mm.
And while I'm walking towards the mini tour, wherever it is he's taking me, I'm looking around and I'm noticing that, hey, my competitor actually has most of the equipment that I sell. They're actually using my competitor's equipment. How would I ever learn that from the lobby or from a Zoom call? You never would, right? And so these are sort of the litany of rules. And that's just a little package of them, like a little 5-pack of rules that I follow, for that particular type of situation. And so, one of the ones I made this rule up in the 80s, as you'll tell, it's called never fax the facts or ship the shit, right? And people are like, we don't use fax machines anymore. And I'm like, I know that, but I couldn't figure out a little like
Don't email
whatever,
the
like kind of
email.
rhyme. Right. Yeah. It just doesn't
It just
sound right.
doesn't sound
Right.
right.
Right. And so I still use never fax the facts. Right. And I never ship anything into customers. We always deliver it. Customers say, oh, just ship it in and we'll get, we'll look at it. No, insurance, we have to deliver it. We have to set it up and make sure that it's, connected properly. I'll show you guys how to use it. And because the reason why is because most times whenever you send something to a customer to evaluate, they only look at it for the first 10 minutes that it's there and the last 10 minutes before you pick it up or you ship it back, and they forget about it in the middle. And usually your product is just there to justify decisions they've already made in their mind. Your job in selling to them is to show them how they're going to feel using your product, right?
Mhm.
And that's done face to face. And so that's why I never fax the fax and I never ship the SHIT, right? And so I always deliver it. And again, another rule, like whenever they ask me for something, like say, hey, can you give us a demo of your, discombobulator, right? No problem. When would you like to see it? Well, how about next week? And oftentimes what I'll say is, oh no, it's too busy. Like I can't get it that fast. It's tied up. And then they'll say, and I'll say, how about 2 weeks? I'll be back in your building. And no, just ship it in. No, can't ship it in. I have to set it up. And then they're like, can you leave it for 2 weeks? And whatever time they give me, I divide it by at least 50%, like half. So if they say I need it for 2 weeks, I say, oh, the most we can do is a week. It's too busy. I got to ship it out to California for another customer. And I compress the time and I make everything seem more scarce than it is. And really, I'm actually doing us all a favor because most of the time it just sits there and
Mhm.
they don't actually use it. So you're kind of wasting a valuable resource. If at any point during this process, I determined there's going to come a time where there becomes this unequivocal epiphany, right? And the epiphany is that you're not getting the business. And sometimes that can occur in the first, like on the mini tour. Like, for instance, maybe they want to buy discombobulators from me, and I realize they got 9 discombobulators from the number one brand in the planet, and they only want me to keep the price fair from the other guy. And they're like, oh, we're looking at Glenn's discombobulator, so then give us a good price. And the 10th one they're going to get a deal on, right? And so the moment I realize and I have the epiphany that I absolutely am not going to get the order under any circumstance, which can happen at any moment. At that moment, I immediately recuse myself and stop selling 100%. And I don't do it rudely. It's not like I just turn around and walk out. But at any point when I realize, hey, we're not going to get the order, I immediately do 2 things. I stop selling to that customer and I immediately go and find a new customer for that product and I race to that customer to try to win business there because the salesman that's beating me at the other customer can't be in 2 places at once.
It's true.
And people are often, well, why don't you, try to convince them? And a good salesman would turn them around and handle the objections. And I said, no, no, no. Like, if that's what's needed, then that's what I will do. But that's not unequivocal epiphany. An unequivocal epiphany is like they have a contract with IBM, and they're
Mhm.
not going to buy my product, right?
Mhm.
And so why would I waste my time, right? And so, and the other competitors will be fighting it out and, oh, why don't we take you on a tour of our factory and show you all of our, they're still not going to win, right? And so they're wasting all that time and resource.
I
And
love that
so,
you value your resources like that to be able to
yeah,
just know to stop selling right then.
yeah. And that rule is called I'd rather be last than second, because
Oh,
second is really just the very first loser, right?
yeah. There was a part in our hypothetical story that has me just still a little hooked. So when you're walking through your mini tour and you observe that the customer has all of the equipment from your competitor, how would you address that?
So one of the things is that I wouldn't address it at all except for mentally, and I'm putting it as much.
Oh,
I'm tracking as much as I can mentally without any distractions because I don't want to spook them in any way. Because let's say I say, "Oh, I didn't realize you were using Acme discombobulators." The guy's gonna like, I knew I shouldn't have brought this guy on a mini tour, right? I need to get there and figure out what's happening so I don't say anything. I just taking information and I'm saying, and but because oftentimes what happens on the good side of things is you realize, like, I didn't realize they were using flux capacitors. We sell those as well. And I won't mention it. I won't say anything, but I'll say, hey, they're using that kind of product too. And they've got a bunch of them, and we have a really good one. And so I'll go to the mini tour. I'll see where they want to use the thing that I'm there for. And then when I'm done, I'll say, I noticed on the way in that you guys have a whole litany of flux capacitors set up. I don't know if you realized it, but we're the leading brand of that, right? Whatever. Who's responsible for, for that kind of a thing or something like that, right? And they're like, oh, that's Jack, but he's really busy. We can't bother him. And I'm like, that's no problem. But
always really
but I'm
busy.
taking the notes, right? I'm
Mhm.
taking the notes. And then I get to the mini tour's over. The guy wants to look at my product. He asked me for a demo. I tell him I have to drop it off. I said, how about next Thursday? He said, okay. Then I go back and I call Jack and I say, Jack, your company's, really excited about evaluating our product next Thursday. I noticed, Bob mentioned you're the flux capacitor guy. Can I get a few minutes of your time, right? And I want to drop off some information. Oh, I'm really busy. I'm like, that's no problem. Can I just drop it off to you next week when I'm in the building? Yes, no problem. And then when I'm there, I'm not sitting in the lobby. I call Jack and I say, hey, I'm finished with Bob. I mentioned I was going to be here, and he pops down and the whole thing starts over again,
Wow.
right?
You're persistent.
And yeah, that's how I do it. And notice that most of my time I'm not spent in my office trying to make appointments. I'm doing everything in real time. I drop everything off. Everything is done face to
Mhm.
face. And what ends up happening is while you're in the building on your mini tour, doing your demos, and you're meeting other people and other stakeholders in that business for other products you sell, because I sell products from all over the world. And so different departments use different products, but the same company uses many things often that we sell. Right? I don't want to only have a product that I can sell one of this to this one customer. That's not what we do. We bring a basket of technology to an industry. Right now, I'm in the power generation industry, the utilities. We bring them a bunch of products that they can use in their electrical generation plants, right? And so I'm looking for, the guy who's responsible for the batteries, and the guy who's responsible for the transformers, and the guy who's responsible for the breakers, and they're all different people, right? And I'm moving from this one to this one to this one. And while I'm there, I'm getting saying, hey, can I come back next week while I'm here and see you about that, right? And it saves you time. And most of your week ends up being filled without needing to be sitting in the office. And because a lot of salespeople, I often challenge them, tell me about your week. And they often say, oh, I'm usually on the road like Tuesday to Thursday. And then Friday, I'm doing cleanup. And Monday, I'm making appointments and things like that. And I'm saying, oh, so you basically have a 4-day weekend every weekend. Because remember, like, salespeople are supposed to be in front of customers. And so literally 2 days in a row, Friday, Saturday, Sunday's off, right? And then Monday, that's literally 2 business days out of 5, you're not in front of customers. You need to try to be mindful of that and avoid those kinds of things, because it becomes incredibly expensive for your return on the overall investment of you and your time and your company's time.
How would you translate that wisdom from product to service?
You mean when you're selling services or something
When I'm
like that?
selling myself,
Okay, so but when you say services, is what you sell a service like marketing or something?
coaching, hypnotherapy.
Right.
Yeah. I
So
sell self-help ish.
okay,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, I've never actually sold that kind of a product
Yeah.
before, so that's interesting. You really need to paint the. I have a saying called the punch, perfect pitch, and
Oof.
close. Okay, and so basically, it's the perfect way to present anything to any person, so that you make the most use of the time and you accomplish what you need, which is an emotional reaction to the person. So and I call it the punch. You punch them, not literally, and then you give them a perfect pitch, and then you close them, right? And so when you're selling coaching, you need to literally paint the picture of what they will feel at the other side of the coaching, right? That's the only way to sell coaching. So it depends on what you're coaching them.
I do leadership, I do business coaching, and I do life coaching.
Right, right. Okay, fine.
So, and that's why
So
it's been so vague, right? That it's hard to really, and I love the words that you used was paint how they will feel. And
exactly.
mhm.
Yeah. And so maybe if on the leadership side, right, it's like, first of all, you're going to determine up front the reason that you're presenting to them or talking to them is because they have a problem that they're trying to overcome, like they're struggling to grow in the leadership or something like that. And so when I'm presenting them to them, I'll try to create a change of state to show them how they could be doing it better right now already. They're just not. And so, for instance, I might show them a video of a person that's really knocking it out in the park leadership wise. They're guiding a group at work, they're taking them through a difficult problem or whatever, and everyone's, raptly, sort of listening to, hanging off their every word, right? And that's kind of like the pitch, the punch, where you're changing their state. You don't walk in and say, I've been doing coaching for 20 years and I've got 400, Yelp, reviews or something like that, right? You don't say that. You basically say, I'd like to start with this video and hit start, right? And you just let them watch that person be a leader. And then what you do is during the perfect pitch, you take them through what I call the Goldilocks principle, right? Where it's everything's done in the power of three. And you would show them, first of all, you tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. That's that's power of three. You break it down into three chunks. I would say you show the person, now you can get to times to show them what the person was like before the coaching and say, can you imagine this was the same person? Then you would show the second part would be, you'd show them how they evolve through the coaching, right? And then maybe some other aspect of the coaching. And then at the end, the close, because you've done the punch, you did the perfect pitch. And then the close is basically them saying, well, how much do you cost? Because if they're not asking you how much you cost, you didn't do a good enough job. And you kind of need to come back and start over. You should
Start
never have to tell them
start over.
what you cost.
Wow.
Start
Okay.
over.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yes, because it's like, like when you go and you see something that you want, it could be anything, right? I often use cars because everyone has probably fallen in love with a car that they wanted or whatever. And it's like, how much is the car, right? You just want to know. And then at that point, people know like you're sold. You just need to figure out how to make it so you can own the particular thing, right? And so those are some of the ways I might approach selling a service of that nature, right?
So I'm going to switch topics altogether. So years ago, so I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, I guess. So I started my namesake brand like
Okay.
a while ago. And someone actually told me that that was a horrible idea that I started a business based off of my name because it wouldn't set me up in a position to sell the business. And
Right.
so, as someone who has successfully, you're a serial entrepreneur who keeps selling his businesses and
Yeah.
buying more successfully. What's your take?
So it can be a great idea if you are the brand, but it does become challenging when you're trying to sell the business. So if you are like a consultant or a coach or something like that, and you have a long-term personal involvement in it, it makes sense and what have you. However, the drawbacks are scaling it and sailing it, right? Scaling
Uh-huh.
and sailing, right? It's difficult that way. It also is limiting in the perception of your size as well. And if your personal brand and you take a personal hit in some way, it can create a crisis of is the business in crisis now because Marcy's injured or something? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so what I would do, but if you've done that, there's not much you can do but you would want to evolve it over time, right? Marcy and Sons, right? Like that kind of a thing,
Got it.
right? And, Marcy Associates, and things like that, right?
Got
And
it.
then, but what I did was because I wanted a namesake brand,
Okay.
I used my initials, and that's how I came up with Gap Wireless, right?
Brilliant.
But yeah, but when the Gap clothing company sued me for trying to pass off my name, because my company name was Gap Wireless, and in the mid 2000s, you'll never guess what they came out with, a new product called the Gap Wireless Bra.
No.
I,
And
I
they
kid you
came
not.
after you.
They did.
Wow.
They did. And so they said to me, they said, we Gap Wireless Bra, we were here first, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm like, no. And so I hired a trademark guy, and we went to it's like a court, but it's with a tribunal, a trademark tribunal and whatever. It's very official, lawyers and, like a judge kind of a guy and whatever.
Sounds awful.
And they're like, I'm not trying to pass it off. I said it's my name, right? And they're like, oh, it's your name, is it? And they're like, what's your middle name? And I said, oh, it's James. And they're like, well, then why is it Gap Wireless? And I said, well, because my wife's name is Alyssa, and Jip Wireless doesn't sound that good.
No, it really doesn't.
And so the judge guy started laughing, right? And because it was part of my name, I was actually able to maintain and get the trademark, and they settled with me and they let me keep it. And
Oh,
Gap Clothing Company is they had over 40 disputes with other companies around the world about the word Gap. So they are not fooling around. And so I
wow.
was pretty proud that I got to keep the trademark Gap Wireless. And so, but I learned a few things that you have to add helper words and have things like Gap Wireless or Marcy and Sons or Marcy
Right.
Associates or something like that, right?
It makes
And
sense.
over time, I would, even knowing what I know now, also learn, never put a country in your name. Right? You don't want to have like Gap Wireless Canada or something like that. It limits your scope of your geography and how you can grow. And you can never take it out of your name. And it's difficult. And so over time, I would probably evolve, like let's say it was Marcy Walker Consulting or something like that. What I would probably do, knowing what I know now, over time, I would probably evolve the brand to Marcy Walker Consulting, and then I'd really jazz up the MWC, and then later I would shrink it down to just MWC,
Got it.
and then
Brilliant.
I would sell the business.
It's
Yeah,
brilliant. How
yeah.
long is the runway typically to sell a business and help with the merge? Are you obligated to stay?
So most companies are sold for the exact, not the same amount of dollars. That's not what I mean, but they're sold in pretty much the exact same way, which is a multiple times the year-end profit, right? And the profit is adjusted based on certain parameters. And so basically, if you're below $1 million a year of profit, it probably sells for 2 to 3 times your annual profit, right? If it's above a million to 10 million, it's in the 5 times range, 5 or 6 times range. And if it's above 10 million, the numbers start to they start to increase very excitedly. You know what I mean? In terms of like you could get 10 times your profits if you're like $15 million of profit a year. And so basically the time to sell is when 2 times or 3 times or 5 times or 10 times is the number that you're willing to take and leave and not come back. The other thing is that certain types of businesses, like recurring revenue, pays the most amount of money when people buy your business. Repeat business comes next, and eat what you kill business comes after that, right? Where you have to go and get every customer every time, and they have a finite amount of time, and then you have to replace them with something else. So the most highest businesses are things like SaaS companies, where people sign on and every month they cut a check to your business. Boom, 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 boom. $29.95 a month, like Netflix, right?
Hmm.
They sell for huge multiples because there's recurring revenue. The private equity and these companies love recurring revenue. Beyond that, they love repeat revenue, and then regular day-to-day sales, right? One onesie twosie at a time, right? And so essentially, when you want to know how long it'll take, it's like, well, I'm doing this because I want 1 million, 5 million, or $10 million or whatever. Then you just take the math and work backwards. Like if I want 10 million, then I'm going to need either $2 million of EBITDA times five, and that's really how it's figured out and it's done.
Okay.
And there's lots of there's lots of really good resources out there on how to position your business before you're going to sell it, while you're selling it, and in order to maximize. That's not my area of specialty. I mean, I know little bits here and there, but there are definite things you want to be doing to make your business more attractive to be sold and to worth more money, where instead of getting a $2 million check, you get a $3 million check because you did this, this, and this, right?
Right.
And there are specific things, and there are dozens of podcasts that'll teach you that, and I do suggest people follow and listen carefully to this advice, because some of that advice I did know and some of it I didn't know. And I can tell you that when I sold my company, some of what I thought were my benefits and the reasons why they were interested in my business, but not interested in paying me more. And so,
Wow.
because to sort of, I don't want to talk in riddles. So like our business, when we sold it, was very disciplined and structured. We had a system for everything. Okay. And so we had a accounting system that was installed and perfect, right? Our marketing is perfectly aligned, everything, systems for everything. And so they couldn't come in and add systems quickly and increase the value very rapidly and say, hey, we took it from X million to Y million, because we'd already done it. So they were glad to have it, but they didn't pay me for it because they couldn't get the lift from it, right?
Right.
So in other words, like, let's say you want to change your accounting system from horse and buggy to state of the art. You're better off sometimes being in the middle of that while you're selling the business versus having done it and bragging about it.
Interesting. My dad that we talked about just a little bit ago, he's at the age where he wants to retire, but he still wants to hold on to the business. And so listening to you, it really indicates that there needs to be a plan. And he's kind of in that process right now of revamping accounting systems and doing all the things to position to sell and make it more attractive. It's fascinating.
So there's lots of, and oftentimes people skip having a broker when they're selling the business, but it's like trying to sell your house without a realtor, right? I mean, the realtor comes in, you think all your stuff on the kitchen counter looks, cool. And they're like, get rid of it all, right? Nothing on the counter. Right. I built that stuff and put that on that counter for the last 40 years. And, you're either getting 1 million for your house or 1.5 million or whatever. With the counters are empty, you're getting 1.5 million. With all your tchotchke on the counter, you're getting 1 million. And people are they're so hung up. And so when you're selling your business, you should always find a broker that's a long-term relationship that will stick with you over the long term and get you the best possible price and help you with all that stuff. And it's like, well, I don't want to have to pay them 5%. They get you way more than 5% extra for your company. So they're free, right?
It pays for itself. I laughed because you said that you had systems for everything. And it seems like you are a very system process powered person. And I can't wait to get my hands on the book, because it can just sense that there's so many different rules and strategies in the way that you have it organized. I'm definitely gonna reach out and
and it's not all about sales, right? It's not all about sales. Like, for instance, one of them is like people will ask me and they're like, do you really have a part in your book that tells you whether you can start eating or you have to wait until everyone gets their food? Do you know the answer to that? Right? I'm not wanting to deliberately put you on the spot, right? But I mean, there's a very simple answer. And so that I did the research, and it's what I've established as being the gospel, which is if there's less than 6 people, then you wait, right?
Okay.
If there's more than 6 people and they're bringing the food sporadically, you can start. And so, and that's the rule I follow. But why do you need that in your sales book, right? Because, well, you're going to be at lunches and dinners all the time with customers and vendors and bankers and lawyers, and they know how to eat, right? And so I even go over where to sit at the table, when to arrive, what to order, how to order, what to order on the menu, because I've seen people destroy their relationship with their behavior in restaurants, right?
Wow.
And so,
That's surprising to me.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I could see someone overindulging in alcohol and getting pretty tipsy, right? That would destroy the relationship. But what are some of the other examples of what you've seen that have destroyed?
So, well, there's the one like that even 40 years later, it's called doing a Quigley. And like a lot of people know me, so doing a Quigley is basically, it's named after a person. I've changed their name slightly, right? So I call it the Quigley, but his real name is slightly different. And so, but doing a Quigley is where you go in and you're not the boss, right? And you go in and you open the menu, and no matter what's on the menu, it could be like surf and turf and like, steak and this and that and whatever, or it could be dog crap. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what's on the menu. Whatever's most expensive, that's what they order. That's what they order, right? And so what ends up happening is the first time it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, this guy's getting the surf and turf with the extra lobster tail too, right? And the and so, and then what happens a second time, and depending upon who's present or whatever, and now in a lot of cases, that's more a career limiting move than a customer faux pas, right?
Mm.
Like customers don't really care because they're probably not paying. But who does care is the owner of the business. You don't want to be that guy who's always ordering the most expensive thing, because the guy who ends up ordering the most expensive thing oftentimes starts out with 2 expensive scotches, then he orders the surf and turf with an extra lobster tail, then he gets creme brulee or something for dinner, for dessert, and then he orders a Spanish coffee. Meanwhile, the owner, he basically has a piece of salmon with some rice and asparagus or whatever for $22.95. I mean, I'm just making it up right now, but I mean,
So don't be a Quigley.
don't do it quickly,
Don't do
right?
a Quigley.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll just give you one other rule, which is, it is kind of sales related, but it's called $10 million in diamonds, right? And so $10 million in diamonds is about a guy I knew. I worked with him when I was a teenager in a jewelry store, and he ended up leaving that jewelry store and opening his own store. And so 10 years later, I moved away. I was in sales, and this was when I lived in Niagara Falls, and I was living in Toronto at the time, but I came back to Niagara Falls to visit some people, and I ended up driving by his store, and I thought, oh, I wonder if he'll remember me, right? And he was an old Italian guy from Italy. He had polio as a child. He was disabled, so he was very affected, like in a way, like you never forgot this guy when you met him. And he had this heavy Italian accent. And so I went into his store and I said, "Oh, is Romeo here? It's Glenn." And he ended up coming out from the back. And I said, "Oh, Romeo, how's it going?" "Oh, it's great. It's great. So great to see you." And I'm like, "How's it going?" He goes, "Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing." And I'm like, "How's business?" And he's like, "Oh, it's so busy." He goes, "I could be doing a $10 million in the diamonds, but I'm so busy in the back fixing the watches. Why don't you just hire a watchmaker and stand out front and sell diamonds?" But he was too busy fixing watches to sell $10 million in diamonds. And
That's
so
big lesson right there.
when we're at work now, all we say to each other is $10 million in diamonds. Like, we don't need to tell the story. Don't do a Quigley. $10 million in diamonds. And so that's the way in the book, the way the rules, they become, the title is the rule itself. It's self-evident what it means.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait to get my hands on it. So thank you so much for taking time out of
You're
your
welcome.
day and being here. How can my audience find you?
So the easiest way is just go to my website, glennpoulos.com, or to LinkedIn and connect with me there. Happy to talk to people. And, there's no pressure. If they want to buy the book, they can buy the book. And, that would be awesome. And always happy to chat with people on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And can they find your book on Amazon? Or is it
Yeah, it's
just
on
directly?
Amazon, all the bookstores. Yeah. Yeah,
Perfect.
every kind, audio book. I narrate the book, and
You do?
yeah, yeah.
Wow, that was
So
a
you
labor
can
of
get
love.
hardcover, softcover, Kindle, audio, whatever flavor you want.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you letting me pick your brain and sharing all your wisdom of 40 years of being in sales.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Marcy.
Not a problem. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.